Hello, I am Elan Kelman from University College London in the UK and the University of Agder in Norway. You are listening to the Coffee and Geography podcast, so grab yourself a brew and enjoy the listen.
Hello everybody, and welcome back to the Coffee and Geography podcast. And I am approaching what is apparently the second biggest, largest flood barrier protection in the United Kingdom. Wow, I've just come round the corner. Second biggest after the Thames Barrier in London, the Denver Sluice. Look at that, on the Great River Ouse. And I'm going to meet a couple of folks from the Environment Agency, one of them who is a climate ambassador. So yeah, I'm going to find somewhere to pull up, park up, and I'm really excited to have this wonderful, wonderful discussion. We have our brews. Cheers everybody. So we are not in the Coffee and Geography coffee house today, folks, because I'm here at Denver Sluice. Well, the Denver complex to be precise, 'cause if I was in Denver Sluice I'd be sitting over there or nice. So first of all, let's introduce ourselves. Everyone knows me, but if we start with you, Katie.
Thank you. I'm Katie Teesdale-Ward and I work on Fens Integrated Adaptation, which is a very long title, and I'm the Stakeholder Engagement Manager.
Lovely.
Hi, Louise Wilson, and I'm the Strategy Advisor with the Fens 2100 programme in the Environment Agency.
You forgot something very, very important, Louise.
Yes, I have been with you before.
Previously on
Coffee
and Geography
I think it
podcast
was
guest.
Season 2.
Season 2.
Yeah.
And you made a return at the coffee house as well.
I did, yes. So this is my third appearance.
This is your third appearance. I think.
Veteran.
I know, yeah.
I think if you take away the returning co-hosts for the Espressos and Geographies,
Yeah.
you might actually be the most recurring.
Well, there we go.
Yeah.
That's it.
What better than the Environment Agency, folks?
Exactly.
And last but definitely not least, we have Amy.
I'm Amy Shaw, so I'm the Environment Agency's Flood Risk Manager for the Fens, and I'm also the Programme Director for Fens 2100.
It's amazing. And thank you so much for setting this up for today. And Katie, a lovely surprise for you to be here, which is brilliant. I mean, I've got, it's a trip. Well, if we take the complex itself, a quadruple treat, really.
Yeah.
To be honest.
You're very welcome. It's great. It's fantastic.
It's such a shame we've only really got a morning, because we got here almost 2 hours ago now, didn't we? And we've been having fantastic deep discussions. We've been walking around the complex and seeing things. But the first thing to say, I think, to start us off really would be, what is the Denver complex? Why is this place important? Because there are people listening across the world. They've probably heard of things like the Thames Barrier. They might have heard of the Three Gorges Dam. We're small compared to that. But even people who live in the next county along, in Suffolk or in Norfolk or in Essex or something like that, some people even haven't heard of that. So which one of you folks would like to go first tell us a little bit about what the Denver complex is?
Do you want me? Yeah. So we are in Denver at Downham Market in Norfolk, not Denver, Colorado, sadly. But this is the second largest tidal complex after the Thames Barrier, and very little known about it in the general public, but it is such an important asset for the Environment Agency, for the Fens as well. It is such a large complex of sluices and gates that maintain water levels 24 hours a day, 365 days of the year for the Cambridgeshire area.
So we've got maps all over the room, which is I'm in heaven. But you've also got these interactivity things as well, which is very great to visualise what's going on. So Amy, I mean, Louise has given us kind of an overview of what this complex does, but I mean, it's more than just a Fens thing. It's more than just a tiny little part of the UK. I mean, the significance of this place, I would say, not just regionally, but nationally, is quite significant. Yeah,
it's it provides a nationally important function for for the UK. It essentially this complex and the work that goes into sustaining the water levels is so vital for the East Anglian area as a whole, and essentially what we've got here is a set of assets that we call them, that are working, as Louise said, 365 days a year, 24 hours a day, to maintain those water levels in a landscape that's fundamentally below sea level. And without them, essentially this area would revert back to what it was originally. So it would go back to that intertidal landscape, which is not a landscape that's viable to live and to work in. So the land that you see and places like Cambridge are essentially sustained through these assets and through the work that ourselves and others around us do.
and we were talking a bit earlier about basically the lack of awareness of the significance, the national as well as the regional significance of this place. So I grew up in Harlow in Essex. I mean, growing up with just Chelmsford just up the road, and I'm looking at the map over there. We've got you've even got water transfers all the way down to Essex from this. So people, you're going past Bury St Edmunds and Suffolk, down through into Essex towards Chelmsford and all that. So water management then, in terms of, it's not just flooding, is it? It's about water availability, water security.
But you picked on a really good word there. It's water management. This isn't. There are so many different aspects to this. I mean, I grew up in Boston in Lincolnshire, which is proper fenland. So I am fens through and through, and my knowledge about this system is really limited. I knew it was here, but I didn't know the scale of it. I didn't know the levels of which it is managing this landscape and how far-reaching it is.
Yeah.
So, we talk about, people kind of know about the Thames Barrier. It's something that people, school trips to there.
Quite a famous case study, for a geography teacher.
I remember going there as a kid a long time ago, and it was only just recently knocked up. So, but this should have that same level of awareness, not just for the Fens area, but for, for a wider kind of, this is an exemplar of what water management looks like. My humble opinion from a Fens girl's perspective.
Yeah, but I think you've got, I don't even know if this is a word or I'm making it up, but I think you've got valid bias there. I don't even know if that's a term. No, nowadays we'd say things, that's totally valid, that is. But no, I just think that you've basically you've got the evidence, you've got the mechanism, you've got all that kind of stuff behind you to actually back up your claims there. So it's a very, very valid claim. So we were talking. So let's try and categorise then what this thing is. So we said, right. So it's water management, water redistribution, flood prevention, flood protection, landscape conservation. What can we add to that list? So that's 5 so far.
It essentially sustains the lives and livelihoods of most
protection
of the people.
Culture and livelihoods, social cohesion.
Underpins businesses, especially for an area like the Fens where you've got huge areas, where it's so critically important for growing food. The management of water, both in preventing it from getting too wet, but also in providing water to enable those, the crops to grow, is so vital in this landscape. So, you've got that, we're fundamentally underpinning that, that whole business side and commercial side, which provides food security for UK PLC as a whole.
Yeah. Before we go down, because we could that would naturally segue into things like changing and climate change, but let's pull back a little bit in terms of the mechanisms of how this works. And if you're listening on the podcast, folks, we will try our very, very best to make this as verbal as possible. If you're watching on YouTube, which is always the better experience. Then we'll make sure there's some overlays for you so you can actually see this in action. So let's take each of those very briefly if we can about the mechanisms that they work. So first of all, let's start with what people might associate is the most obvious one, and that's flood protection. So when you've got these sluices and these gates in operations, you've got the tidal effect coming off from the North Sea and into the Wash. So you've got those tidal pressures coming. So that's pretty much very, very similar to the way the Thames Barrier work, I imagine. Yeah. And then you've got the river pushing back.
You've got basically all the fluvial, the inland River and all of the rain that falls in that catchment flowing out to sea, and then from the other side you've got the tidal influence coming up all the way up to this point where we're sitting. So what we're doing here is managing that interface between those two. We're providing storage for all of that water that's flowing from inland, and we are holding it within the system about here until that tide level gets low enough for us to get it out to sea. We're also, we don't have a lot of gravity in the Fens, you know, it's very, very flat.
Great for cycling.
Great for cycling.
You say Norfolk has got the stereotype of being the flat lap, but no, it's further west, folks. Further west over here.
Yeah, so we're having to build gravity into the system essentially.
Yeah.
So what we've got here is a series of sluices which artificially holds those water levels up, so that we can build that gravity and then use that gravity to get out. So in other places you've got that natural gravity where the river is flowing from a higher part of the land out to sea. We don't have that in this landscape, so we're having to artificially create it, essentially.
Which, as a Scottish girl, has just completely bamboozled me. Like moving to, but that's what I love about this job and living here. It's such a completely different way that it works, and that challenge of learning of how we manage it. I've never seen anything like it.
That's a really interesting insight, actually. I was thinking, you know, if people are listening to you talk on the podcast for the first time, they're quite going to say, well, I don't think Louise is from here. but this is why I strongly recommend folks you listen to our chat previously, in season 2, where you talk about that kind of stuff. But yeah, I mean, let's just quickly pick up on that before we go back to what we were talking about. If you were to say there was like, apart from the landscape, stuff like that, but the fundamental difference you feel between the way that you protect this land in terms of water and flooding compared to in Scotland, you must have to have a completely different way of thinking of things, surely, because of what folks are used to up north.
Oh, definitely. It's so much more structured down here. So when I worked for SEPA, Scottish Environment Protection Agency, it was very cut and dry, or wet, however you look at it. It would come off the hills and it would just keep flowing. The River Tweed would then just keep flowing and go out to sea. And we had one weir in the entirety of the Scottish borders, and it was coming out of Megget Reservoir. So it wasn't, and that was just to control the amount of water coming out of that reservoir. That was the only reason. All the rest of it was very natural. Yeah. Whereas down here, it's very much controlled with its gates, its weirs, its sluices, its pumps as well. So having to learn how that water moves around the system, and how much up in Scotland you've just got, it's just always there. The river is always there, but actually here, if it could well disappear if somebody gets something wrong. If one gate's opened the wrong way, you could end up with a bit of a disaster, either too much water or too little. Either way.
24/7 as well, as you mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
Yes, we've got two Denver Dans here, and Denver Dan 1 and Denver Dan 2, and does Denver Dan 1 also live on site, or do both Dans live on site? Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, we have to have somebody on site 24 hours a day.
That's incredible.
Yeah, so,
And the key word you said earlier was about gravity, because in Scotland you've got tons of gravitational energy, tons of potential energy that you can make use of.
Can't move for it.
Can't move for it, yeah. It's like, that's probably why the Scots are so hardy, because they feel they've got to push against gravity. And that's why they take the mickey out of us in the south. But joking aside, so then we've got, so a question then that people might be having when they're listening then, and again, for yourself, Amy, I guess, if there's so little of that potential, so little of that gravity, and we have got, I mean, how deep does it go below sea level here? Like, is it 45 metres?
The lowest part,
rather than deepest,
I think, is 2.6
metres.
We can check, but I think that's sort of the Holme area near Peterborough.
And people think, that's not much, 2.6. No, folks, if you think of a whole entire landscape and it's a bowl, and the deepest point of that is 2.6 metres, you know, that's deeper than any swimming pool, and that can fill up quite easily. So we've talked about the flood mechanisms, about the tidal stuff like that. So I was really, really fascinated, and please, Katie, if you want to come in on this as well, about the Essex water transfer scheme. Because again, we were talking about international examples, folks. You've got what China are doing, and trying to divert water from the wettest part in the east down back to against all the river flows and things like that. Okay, fine, that's a massive example, but it's so important here.
Yeah.
It's so important here, and I guess from an environmental agency and an Anglian Water point of view, it's pretty key.
Yeah, so it's a really fascinating aspect to Denver that I think again is also really not well understood. So fundamentally, we've got what's called the Ely to Essex Ouse transfer scheme. So essentially designed when there wasn't enough water in Essex, and so it was designed to provide additional capacity to Essex because there was belief that there was more water in this part of the country. So essentially, we, again, in terms of that water management, so in periods when we have excess flow, we actively divert the flow from here at Denver. We send the flow backwards, which is mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Down what we call the cut-off, the relief channel. No, cut-off channel. Cut-off channel.
Yeah.
Down back the cut-off channel,
Okay.
and then we put it into a pipe, and essentially we divert it all the way from here down into Essex, and we put it into
Incredible.
2 reservoirs down in Essex, and then that provides drinking water for people in Essex.
Yeah, that's really just so incredible. It's just so mind-boggling because, we're on an international scale. You could say we're a small kind of example. But having said that, if you think about it from a local scale, so if you look at it from a global scale downwards, it looks like a small scheme. But if you switch that around, flip that around from a kind of a local community scale back up that way, this thing is huge.
Yeah,
this is
really
absolutely
important, yeah.
massive. Some things you said earlier about this, Kate, was really interesting. Yeah, so.
Just if you were to go to Essex High Street, there must be just one main high street, I'm sure, in Essex. How often do I go to Essex?
We're all the same.
And do a straw poll about, where do you think your water come from? Not in a million years would they think it was from around here. Not in a million. But, I used to deal with like the River Stour Trust and the Colchester Canoe Club, and about the services that they would say that you're trying to get engagement with all their different communities about river quality and various other things, and just never did they once think, oh yeah, so we can trace that all back. And I think there's a real opportunity here with what we're trying to do is to try and draw those dotted lines back to people understanding about where the nature is. So where they may not want to or have that desire to understand the engineering about this kind of system, but they are interested about having green spaces and blue spaces. And they are interested about going into engaging with nature and what that looks like, not just for themselves, for their kids and their communities.
Yeah.
So this is
especially as the understanding that our disconnected nature is what's also fueling a mental health crisis as well.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I think to try and kind of think of like an everyman's perspective, there are so many crises that people are looking into and trying to manage. And sometimes that is totally overwhelming. Yes. But there are kind of, I think that there is an opportunity with the work that's being done here is kind of a way in which you can sort of go up the gears. If you think about driving, if you think everybody's in neutral, you can pull up the gears going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to what those gears are representing. And if nature can be one of those gears, how do you drive into that? What do people need to connect in order to feel part of it, in order to contribute to a climate conversation? Not necessarily frame it as a crisis, but how can we get communities, how can we get children, how can we get parents, businesses talking about climate adaptation and the conversation about water, where water comes from, the quality of water, whether we've got too much, what happens when we have too little. There's a whole raft of conversations that I think just by being in this venue today has helped me visualise what we could do better collectively.
I love that. Yeah, getting that sense of place and connectivity by actually going. And this is why getting back out into things in nature and visiting places, and why obviously ex-geography teacher field trips. It's so important.
They are really hard to understand. These sort of
Yeah.
places are so, you have to get in them, you have to feel them, you have to look at them.
I think I'm a pretty smart person, but in terms of the way that this place works, until I actually got here and I saw it for myself, I didn't understand how it works. And I know you say there are some mechanisms that you have to double check because it's just so complex, there's so much involved. But
Been down here 10 years and I still don't fully understand just what has to happen at what time and when, how this works in its entirety, because it is so complex. But
that's okay.
It's okay,
because it's a team effort,
Yeah.
and it's knowing the bits.
Dan who does know.
We do,
And if anything goes wrong, blame one of the dads. But in all seriousness, it's an example of how actually connected together community-based efforts and collaboration is so important, because we're not all going to understand everything.
Yeah.
And when it comes to dealing with any kind of crisis, I love the saying that we don't want a couple of people to do it all and be perfect. We need everybody to be imperfect, just know what they can and do what they can. So this landscape is completely man-made. What a lot of people don't realise. They think the Fens is natural, and then sea levels may have receded a little bit after the medieval warm period, and particularly when the Romans were around in particular. But actually, it is what it is today, because this should be periodically flooded marshland, basically. And in times the water won't even recede because of the bowl, but then you might get some periods of dry. So it should be a cyclic kind of landscape between marshland and things like that. So for it to be pretty much dry with channelization, farming, really, from East Anglia, even UK standards, quite large settlements dotted around. Got Ely and Cambridge, all that kind of stuff. It's completely man-made, but we've inherited this 400. Well, perhaps even further back than that, generational. So we've got it now. We've got it now. We've got. So we'll move on to, after this. We'll go into the climate issue, because we've got to this point now where we've now got so many different stakeholders and so many different things. Because you were saying that there's a triple SI in the area, which is legislation, government legislation to protect.
Yeah, one of the, so we've got just sitting next to us, and in fact the water for Denver manages the water into the Ouse Washes, which is one of the largest flood storage reservoirs in the UK, but it's also incredibly important for the environment. So it's a designated habitat, so it's a triple SI, it's a special protected area, it's a Ramsar site, a special area of conservation. So it's got
special site of scientific interest.
So essentially it's got every designation under the sun. So it's critically important for the environment, but it also has a critically important role as a flood storage area, and that. So, in terms of the complexity of managing that system and balancing all of that, it's, it just adds to the level of complexity of the landscape.
The most obvious example to me, and might be a little bit more known, is the Broads, the Northern Broads. They're another example of a human landscape. Thetford Forest, a lot of people don't understand that Thetford Forest is a man-made feature. It's not a natural feature. That should be shrubland and breckland. It shouldn't be forest. So, but now we're in a situation where we've got these things, we've got communities, we've got a landscape, we've got ecosystems now, and it's like what we were saying a bit earlier, isn't it? We're now in human society, we've put ourselves in that position where we've screwed around with the landscape so much that if we stop managing it, it all will go to hell, basically. But on the other side, and now this will lead into the climate thing, on the other side of it, this is also proof that even though we've got to this situation where we've tied ourselves in knots in the landscape, we can now demonstrate how we can collaborate, we can work together in communities, how we can be adaptive, and how we can build resilience to a change. And one, of course, is the climate crisis. So I loved what you said earlier about Katie, about it's just one crisis on top of another, but for a lot of us who know a lot more about what it actually means, how it's intersectional and all that kind of stuff, for me it's that bubble that almost can exacerbate every other crisis. So it's huge. So from your point of view, then, in terms of what's happening here, what would you say is like probably the most important thing in terms of potential impacts that might come about climate change in this area?
Well, I mean, we've talked about the landscape of the fens and kind of all of those different aspects that might impact it. I think the fens is kind of like it's a perfect storm of different impacts. So we talk about flooding, so there's real impacts on flooding, but there's drought. And what does that impact on food production? And then there's the communities that are impacted, because this is a big agriculture area, but there's also the impact on transport. How do we, and also and massive issue with health. So when we've seen this week or last couple of weeks where there's been acute spikes in heat, and what that's done, the increase of the impact of I hate to say the D word, but deaths through heat.
With the last, so for context, folks, if you're listening to this another time of the year, so the last 3 weeks of June 2025 have been, in terms of a temperature anomaly, the difference from the norm has been, in this part of the country anyway, anything between a couple of degrees up to 10 degrees Celsius warmer than normal, than historical average, and that's at the end of June, and it's been very dry as well.
So hot, dry, and I think we, on Future Fens Integrated Adaptation and with the Fens 2100 programme, we have commissioned or worked with the Tyndall Climate Centre to have a place-based research on climate adaptation, what the Fens is going to look like. And rather than the research coming from Anglian Water or the Environment Agency, it was really important that we made sure that it was a global leader in data specifically around climate. And that's why I'll abbreviate it to the Fens Climate Change Risk Assessment, the CCRA. We've got CCRAs, we've got SSRIs, we've got it all going on. So this whole industry is riddled with acronyms.
Say it with sass. The
CCRA really gave us that evidence to, rather than for it to be a bit pulling in one bit of information here, and it was a collective document that really stated out where we are now, where the possible outcomes could look like, and what we really need to do to impact that. And throughout the whole of the 92-page document led with Katie Jenkins.
Kate Jenkins,
your
my office buddy.
But it gave us that real call to action. So it wasn't something that we could we'll just kick it into the long grass for a while. We need to start working now. There was a real urgency, a real call to action, and that's what the CCRA has done for the for Future Fens. And also for the Fens 2100.
It's been such a crucial piece of work for us, because I think there's always been this we've had lots of discussions about climate change, and we've had the national climate change risk assessments done, but given that the Fens is a unique area, we really wanted to understand how climate change would impact us, and actually the impacts that we would, as this landscape, need to be able to respond to, and also the timescales that we need to work to. So I think it's always, climate change can feel quite complicated to understand, and sometimes there's so much information, it's really hard to get your head around it. But what I really liked about the CCRA is it sort of tied both the risks, the impact, and the timescales all together, and gave us that call to action, and it told us that when we see a 2 degree rise in temperature, which we're going to see somewhere between 2040 and 2050.
Isn't that depressing to say when, not if? Just a thought about that, but yes, sorry, continue.
It told us that a 2 degree rise in temperature, which we may be likely to see between 2040 and 2050. Within this landscape, because of that man-made nature and because of its interconnectedness, as you said, we're sort of sitting in this perfect storm, and we're likely to see these compounding impacts. So we won't just see increase in flood risk. We won't just see, increase in drought. We will also see loss of biodiversity refugia, impacts in terms of temperature rises, and if you think about all of those sort of compounding together, what the Tyndall Centre told us was that, the unique nature of this landscape is that we sort of get it all together, and we've never seen anything like that before. So we don't know, we don't know how our landscape is going to react. So we need to start thinking about it now. And get ourselves in a position, because 2040 is not far away.
It's not that far at all. And actually, not the only audience of this podcast, but quite a large proportion of this podcast are educators, whether they're in formal education or not. And there are people listening to this saying, well, 2040, that's just the new intake of kids. They'll just be coming out of school now in 2040. So we're talking about, these nursery kids, these reception kids, they're just coming out of the school system, or even if they're a little bit older, then they're just trying to make their way in life. They might be going to university. They might be starting to think about what their future is going to be. Are they going to start a family? Are they going to focus on a career? 2040 is not that far away, and it is within the scale. So folks, if you're in the education sector, especially the youngsters, we are talking about, leading up to the formative years of these young people's lives, and that's how soon this is.
Yeah, and that's why we recognise that as practitioners working in this space now, it's up to us to drive that change, because there isn't any more time, is there? It's up to us to drive that adaptation, because you can't, the scale of adaptation that might be needed across these sort of landscapes, and the decisions and the complexity of changes mean that it's going to take time, but we need to be getting on with it.
And we need to make sure that we've got the right people in on that conversation. This is not going. There is not going to be a happy ever after for everybody in that.
Yes.
All of those players.
I agree.
There is going to need to be some, some wiggle room.
Yeah, and how do it's there are balances to be met. We want to deliver the best value for UK PLC. We want to get outcomes. We want to protect nature. We want to support growth. We want to support tourism. But how do we do that?
But then that's where our partnership working comes into play. So that's part of the role of the Fens 2100, working with the FFIA. It's no one single organisation that can have these answers, that can provide the data to come to these answers. We have to work together from every sector, and make sure we're getting as broad an information as possible, so then we can help those decisions being made for the future generations.
And bring that conversation in right at the early steps. So it can be from school kids, of course, but right through to executives at a big landscape, whatever it is. But it's about making sure that narrative is a common thread throughout everything that we're talking about, whether it's planning, whether it's landscape recovery, whatever it is. The report gave us the evidence to act, and we've got an opportunity to do that.
Do you know what I love about the way that this works? So having a look at all this information before talking to Katie Jenkins and people like that, it's speaking also as a climate change science communicator. It is so easy to be negative, to talk doom and gloom and feed into the eco-anxiety, and then people switch off as like, as you said, yet another crisis to deal with, right? So I'm just going to focus. And of course, it's a human nature to become protective of yourself and those closest to you. And that's not a criticism, that's a human trait. So what I love about this is, it's trying to say, let's tap into that feeling and now convert it into a way that we have a lot of power to do with this. Yes, there's going to be changes. Yes, there's going to be things that have to change, that we have to maintain, because it'll be like, we might as well just build a giant science fiction flood wall as high as the sky. That's the only way you're going to keep, like the Simpsons putting the bleeding dome or something like that, Dome depot.
That's something
Yeah.
we keep on about, the value of the fens.
Yeah.
It's something that we're wanting to show that, like I say, it's not all doom and gloom. And yes, we've got all these risks coming in, and we do work to a very managed system. But at the end of the day, we are a very valuable system. We've got a lot going for it. There's, that's why
Just tap into that positivity.
It's part of the reason why I've stayed down here for 10 years now. It's got a place in my heart now because it's so different. And
What a great endorsement.
I love
Yeah.
the fact that
Yeah.
essentially, like, I think this is an actively managed system. You know, I always think it's amazing that 400 years ago somebody had a real forethought to look forward.
400 years ago,
400
yeah.
years ago, somebody looked at this landscape and went, I could do something. And actually,
Yes,
we're still
remember.
working with that. You know, that was
400
so
years later.
visionary.
But it's that proof that this is
essentially-
intergenerational.
Yeah, but we've got to do
Yeah.
that again now. Like, and we have that opportunity. We can, you know, we are brilliant engineers in this, this world. We can engineer this
Oh,
landscape.
yeah.
But we need to, we need to all jointly be working on that. But we have an opportunity to continue sustaining this landscape and to keep it and to build on it and to continue sustaining that value. And we need to think of it like that.
Yeah.
And we need to actively recognise that it does need that active adaptation. You know, it will need to be managed. It's important that it's managed, and we need to work together to consider how we manage it. But we can. We can.
And the way that this is all set up is positive. I'll tell you what, folk, if you do teach geography or anything like that, honestly, or any kind of like, getting hold of these kind of documents, and I'll make sure that you've got the links to get these, and I'll overlay, if you're watching, you'll see an overlay of some of these things, because it's just fantastic. The way you really should do your annotated and you label the sketches and stuff like that. But it looks amazing. It's a future I want to live in, and it's not. And you know what I love about it is because you've got your kind of like your current and before kind of at the start. You're looking at that, and you're not going, oh, we don't need to tear up everything. We don't need to change it. We don't need to have it completely unrecognisable. And you're looking at this and thinking, I want to be a child who wants to live in this future. Or I'm an adult where I want my children and my twilight years to be in this future. And like Louise, no, because this, your heart is growing in this place. You, Katie, with your connections out, you're thinking, oh, this is amazing. What a place to be proud of.
Yeah.
And we can do this because there's nothing in these sketches I see which is not possible today.
No, exactly.
That's and you know what the best thing about it? School trip to a local farm.
Yeah.
It's got on there. You're thinking like that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah.
So to finish off then, because we could talk all day about some amazing stuff. So let's focus on it. You've got here things like getting involved in young people. You say we've got to start real from the very, very young. And that is where things like education comes into play, and then by extension the climate ambassador scheme. So Louise, with yourself,
Yes.
why is it so vital? And like public education, public awareness, I think people have got the gist about why that's so important because of all the interconnectivity. But in terms of getting into these young people, the schools, the children, the offspring of the farmers, of the engineers who live in this area, why is that so important?
I think having something so important on your doorstep is really key. I've sort of seen it. That was how I grew up, was just going around in the Scottish Borders, learning about where I grew up and the ecosystem of it and how it all works together. And I think for the kids in the Fens, not just the kids, anybody living in the Fens, from Lincolnshire right down to Cambridgeshire, there's such an opportunity to get involved. Just going out and looking at it and just feeling, like seeing the engineering, just take a second look at how that river is 2 metres above your head because of the embankments, and the ground is shrinking and things like that. It's just, there's so many ways you can look at it from however you look at the world. So whether you're an engineer and you think about the embankments and the structures, or whether you're an environmentalist and you think about the biodiversity and all the SSSIs and the national park sort of statuses, and just looking at that as well and what we've got going on. I think it's such an opportunity that you could literally go 2 miles out your catchment, not even that, and you would have something that you could relate to. that we're talking about today.
And what a perfect example of, because we were talking about earlier, weren't you, like both the gem and the curse of geography and a geography teacher is that it's by Marmite. You know, the way it gets taught nowadays, like some kids absolutely love it because they love learning about the world, the interconnectivity. They can live other places through geography, experience other places through geography, but then other youngsters say, this has got no relevance to me whatsoever because I'm interested in, you know, the reservoir up the road. I'm interested in what the land behind my house, is that going to be taken up for housing and stuff like that. And this is a perfect example of local issues and importance with local issues right to the street level and the personal level, which can have national, and because of all the other mechanisms here about way you manage this, even global significance to this.
But also you mentioned about, you know, the kid who may just not be connected to like nature or have an interest in this. They might have Weetabix for their breakfast in the morning. Or, you know, they're a toast. Exactly, yeah. They go and do the big shop with mum or dad, and if you look at their trolley and they were to think, right, what if we took out from that trolley the things that are grown within the fens, the things that are interconnected, that suddenly that trolley becomes quite light.
Any ingredient, any logistical thing that got it to that shop.
And that's a conversation starter about climate. That's a conversation starter about food security. That's a conversation starter about water.
Food security.
So there are so many different ways in which we can connect to people about the climate, about this, you know, this centre here, and it's making sure that it's so inclusive. We start from the beginning, right the way through. But at any point, we are talking about not necessarily climate adaptation, is that as a title, but how it can impact them on a daily basis.
That's incredible. So with your climate ambassador's hat on then, Louise. Let's say we've got. I mean, in the ideal situation, we'd have people associated with schools all across this area going, "Oh, this is amazing. We want to know about this," stuff like this. But with your climate ambassador's hat on and kind of like an educational point of view, what can you folks do in terms of, say, if there was that school up the road and they wanted, could they bring a school group here? Could you go and have a chat with them? How would you do that as a climate ambassador?
So as a climate ambassador, I'm more than happy to have the time and go out and speak to schools. If people are interested, we can definitely bring some materials along from both FFIA and the Fens 2100. Or even just in the general Environment Agency's perspective of what else we do as a whole as an organisation.
You do so much.
I know, but we've also got we have links, we have brochures available. We've got links. FFIA have got a website with great videos on the CCRA. There's a CCRA itself you can read. So if you really want some bedtime reading, it's really good.
Highly recommend.
And we've also got in the Fens 2100. We're starting to now produce. We're a very new team, but we are now getting to that point. We're producing actual products. We have a visualised video on the Denver complex itself, which we can share links to. It's on YouTube. Just type in Denver. It's one of the first that comes up. And we're going to have baseline evidence reports available from the autumn, which are all infographics, maps, like really linked up with what we're doing, setting out what we already know about this landscape, and it's letting us know then what the gaps are, where can changes be made, but equally what can we keep the same, because it's not about changing everything, it's about what's working well, and
how we enhance
it.
What a great point.
It would be great to bring those sorts of and those key bits of information out to the local community, and just having those key facts and figures that people might actually sit and think, oh, that's right on my doorstep.
Because what we do here is an exemplar for, you know, it's you've got an international audience and they're probably going, Fens? What?
Where's that? No, seriously, I mean,
if we can impact this region, this becomes all of the learning for other low-lying areas in the world.
So in a school's climate action plan, you've got adaptation and resilience. I think if you happen to have a link with a school in this area, of anything that's influenced by the Denver complex all the way down into Essex, you know, up to Peterborough, whatever, you really need to get something about this in your adaptation resilience section of your climate action plan, because it is so, so important. And it isn't just about flooding, as we've just described already. And if not, well, if you are in this area, but also if you're not, this is like perfect for the climate education and green careers section of a climate action plan, because look at these futures, the amount of the skills and the knowledge and the expertise is required by 2040 and stuff like this. For this to, as you just said, for this to be an exemplar, even if you're in a different part of the country, say, look at how this works, look at the plans they've got. Let's learn about this. Let's use this as a piece of, you know, synoptic example to kind of look at how we could approach. Is this possible in our area? Could we potentially choose this? Is there any lessons for our school, for our community, what they do here? And as I say, you know, Amy, Louise and Katie, you know, you can quite tell their passion about stuff like this. It's a shame we've got to bring this conversation to a close. So thank you all. There's one thing we do need to do. So Louise, you have actually done this before. You've actually done it twice now. I think with you, and this is the part of the podcast called We Are All Geographers, where we link all of the guests together. And my last discussion was with Ray Butchard, who for 30 seconds had a go. I've forgotten what the word is now. I do apologise, Ray and everybody, because it was a while ago now. But he came up with a word which I want you three to have a little bash at for 30 seconds, right? So basically the way this works is I give you a word and you've just got to talk about it for 30 seconons. That's it. Right? That's it.
Sorry, I forgot to mention that part.
Yeah. Maybe Louise should have put this as a caveat. But it's, you don't have to link it to anything. You don't have to link it to the conversation. It's just whatever you can think about the words. Right? So you ready?
Okay.
But you're lucky because you're doing this with two other people. You just get to do it yourself. So you ready for the word then, folks?
Ready.
Let's do it.
Right, and I will be strict with the timing because we are overrunning time. So the word that Ray has given you three is the word polyp. The word polyp.
Polyp.
Yeah. So we are talking. So we're talking about. You know, it's funny how we're talking about water in terms of on the land and landscapes and that. Now we're going all the way to the ocean now. So.
Is it to do with seaweed?
Right, 30 seconds starting now. Even if you're trying to bash out what you think it is.
I thought it was a medical condition. How did they know? Is it hard to cross?
No.
See, my brain goes to seaweed when you say about the ocean. Polyp, it's that bit on the end of seaweed. That's the bit that usually pops when you walk on it.
That's very true.
That's where my brain goes.
It sounds like a really audible word. Polyp. Let's put it with that.
I love how you're feeling the remaining 30 seconds. Well,
we
there
don't
you
know
go.
what the word means. Let's just make noise.
But I love that little segment because look, these folks are certainly experts in their expertise. Doesn't mean they know everything. But okay, I think you folks might be the last conversation of the season. So therefore, the words that you want to come up with will actually probably go through to the first guest of season 6. Ooh. So no pressure. So what word would you like? So you are carrying the chain over to the next season next year. So what is it going to be?
What do we think is the most important thing?
Adaptation.
Oh, that's where my brain was going. I think adaptation.
Adaptation. What a great word. So folks, if I haven't driven myself insane and I get the energy to do a season 6 years of this podcast, we're going to use adaptation. Thank you so much, all three of you, for your time, and this is an absolute fantastic experience. I will be coming back, so I'll try not to make myself too much of a pest. Katie, Louise, and Amy, thank you very, very much for talking to us on the podcast.
You've been great. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Coffee and Geography, folks. If you're itching to know more about the Climate Ambassadors' awesome work, visit www.climateambassadors.org. Don't forget to follow us on Blue Sky at geogramblings.com and use the CoffeeJogPod hashtag to stay in the loop. Submit your questions for our guests on LinkedIn or Blue Sky with hashtag JogQoverABrew. Keep exploring this amazing world, tackling climate action, and flexing your geography muscles. Stay curious, keep jogging, and keep making waves.